Welcome to the IRENA assembly session of the webinar series, Long-Term Energy Scenarios, LTES, for Developing National Energy Transition Plans in Africa. My name is Asami Miketa. I'm leading the energy planning team at IRENA, and I'll be navigating you throughout the event today. First, I would like to invite Dr. Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General of IRENA, to give the opening remark. Gauri, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Asami. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here amongst you to reflect on the role that energy planning and scenarios can play in accelerating the clean energy transition of today. And thank you so much for joining this event on long-term energy scenarios for developing national energy plans in Africa, featuring regional power pools. Today's event is the special session in the webinar series that IRENA has been conducting for the last 2 months in partnership with several institutions. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our partners for their excellent cooperation, and they include the African Union Commission, the African Union Development Agency, the African Development Bank, the GET Transform, the United Nations Economic Commissions for Africa, and the Kenyan Ministry of Energy. Today's session will primarily focus on the African regional power pools and the economic communities, and also speak and discuss about the lessons that we've learned from developing and using the long-term energy scenarios in the continent. The long-term energy scenarios are a very important tool for both the policymakers and the investors as they plan for outlining the pathways that take into account disruptive innovation, business models, and the cost of transition, leading us towards a cleaner and more equitable future. As you are aware, IRENA has been very active and working in the African countries for almost a decade now. And the long-term energy scenarios which have been developed in cooperation with countries have been used as a cornerstone of regional and national energy plans, master plans, which are, as you know, the primary energy planning documents used to guide countries' strategy for medium and long term. In this context, again, as we all know, that the energy planning is a very dynamic process. It has to be collaborative, and it has to continue to engage with stakeholders across government ministries, different level of other actors like the regulators, the utilities, the civil society, to be able to foster an environment where all these stakeholders can come together to build a case for an integrated energy planning. Therefore, to complement the previous sessions of this webinar series that showcase the experiences of African countries in energy planning, we want to bring together regional bodies like the power pools, the regional economic communities, to foster this continued spirit of integrated energy planning at both the national and the regional levels. We are also mindful that given the global nature of this challenge, it calls for an even broader integration. And in this session, we would also like to look at the integration that can happen at the continental level. In particular, how are the efforts that are being made on the regional at the regional planning level can get coordinated and linked to the continental level planning, which, as we are aware, is taking place under the visionary initiative of the African Union to develop the African Continental Power System Master Plan. The African Union Development Agency, which is one of our key implementation partners of this webinar series, has been tasked to lead the development of the Continental Master Plan. IRENA, together with the International Atomic Energy Agency, has been supporting the development as modeling partners. So we hope that today's event is another positive step in supporting this process with the objective of accelerating the energy transition for a cleaner and more just future for the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gauri, for setting the scene and highlighting the importance of the long-term energy scenarios, which is a topic of today's webinar. Before inviting our speakers, let me say a few words about LTES webinar series. So the LTES webinar series was organized as an activity under the framework of IRENA LTES network, and that is a network of energy scenario practitioners in the government sector. And during the webinar series, we featured selected African countries and institutions that share their good scenario planning practices for setting long-term policy, particularly in the context of the clean energy transition. And LTES network is a network of energy scenario practitioners in the government sector, and it is a global platform for the government planners to exchange and good practices in the use and development of model-based long-term energy scenarios, which we call LTES, to guide the clean energy transition. Next slide, please. The focus of the LTES network has three main pillars. The first pillar is about the governments, about how the governments are developing scenarios, particularly in the context of developing scenarios to better reflect potentially transformative changes. And then the second pillar is about how the governments are using scenarios to guide the clean energy transition. And the last pillar is about different approaches on building scenario planning capacity within the government sector. And during the past 6 sessions of the LTES series, we had focused on government and scenario planning practices in the national policy making context. And this special session is different from the past sessions because we feature utilities perspective and regional perspectives. We introduced 2 layers of coordination for this event. One is the power system planning and energy policy making, and the other coordination is the national level planning and the regional level planning. Next slide, please. So in order to address these, we have organized 2 sessions. The first session welcomes the speakers from the African power pools to learn the coordination issues among the national utilities. And the second session welcomes the speakers from the African regional economic community to get their perspectives on the importance of the LTES in developing in the national energy master plans and how to ensure the regional coordination. And from this discussion, we wish to gain insights relevant for the African Union's process for the Continental Power System Master Plan development that is currently undergoing. If audience may like to raise questions, please use the Q&A function. We may not be able to take so many questions, but we will connect with the speakers after the session for any unanswered questions. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to invite the moderator of the first session to start the camera. So the moderator of the first session is Mr. Tishkanda Simbini. He's an energy infrastructure expert at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. He's leading the CMP, the Continental Master Plan development process, and I have a pleasure of working closely with him in this process. So welcome, Tish, and please introduce the PowerPoint session.
Arigato, Asami-san, thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. And bon année. So before I introduce the speakers for this session, let me just give you just a brief overview of the session. So I think it's already been explained. This session will bring together the representatives from the East African Power Pool, the West African Power Pool, as well as the Association of Mediterranean Transmission Operators, MED-TSO. And it will involve 3 presentations from these institutions, and then will be followed by a moderated discussion. So the aim of the session is to showcase how these regional power pools develop and use scenarios to develop regional-wide models and master plans, how they coordinate their member state utilities in their scenario development process, and obtain consensus, and how they support countries with their own development and use of the long-term scenarios. And as you have also heard that we are working on the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, we will also hear from these 3 institutions how their experience can support the development of the ongoing Continental Power Systems Master Plan. So the first presentation will come from the East African Power Pool, and it will be made by Mr. Patrice Marirakiza. And he is an engineer in electromechanics with over 24 years of experience in the energy sector in the Great Lake region and the East African region. And his work experience ranges from electrification programs, that is in hydro, mini hydro, rural electrification, power generation, transmission planning, as well as project management. So prior to his joining the East African Power Pool in 2010, he served the Rwandan Power Utility, REG, which was formerly known as Electrogas, as a trainee graduate engineer from the National University of Burundi, and spent over 13 years working on various high voltage transmission lines, rehabilitation, and construction projects. So he's also worked as a power systems operation and protection engineer at the Rwandan National Control Center, and later served as the head of the planning and studies development department. So now, as in his current role as the senior planning engineer at the East African Power Pool, his primary objective is to ensure that the Power Pool aligns with its mission's objectives, which is to extend the regional infrastructure and integrated power markets into the unified regional markets, where countries can trade and optimize energy resources to benefit the region with reliable, affordable, and clean energy, clean power. And I must also mention that he's part of the team that worked on the integration study between the East African Power Pool and the Southern African Power Pool. And I'm sure his experience and this presentation will help us to also see how they are working on that first step towards the development of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, a component of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan. So with that introduction, let me hand over to Patrice to take us through his presentation. So Patrice, you've got 10 minutes, so over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teach. Good afternoon, everyone. As been introduced, my name is Patrice Marirakiza. I'm working at the Eastern African Power Pool. The presentation is about the EAPP Regional Power System Master Plan, long-term energy scenarios development. Next. The content is covering 4 areas: development of scenarios, EAPP case, use of scenarios. Number 3 will be scenarios capacity building. Number 4 will be lessons for the Africa Continental Master Plan. Next slide, please. For the development of scenarios, the EAPP case, the structure in line with the long-term energy scenario, since the establishment of the Eastern African Power Pool, only 2 power master plans have been developed in 2011 and 2014. The first EAPP power system master plan was developed by a consultant, but the second master plan was through a twinning arrangement where EAPP General Secretariat, EAPP member utilities, ESC, COMESA, and the consultant worked together to develop the 2014 EAPP master plan. EAPP has not a specific team to develop scenarios, but this is planned to be within the EAPP Planning Technical Committee, which is existing during the development of the update of the Regional Power Master Plan. The process of developing the long-term energy scenarios in EAPP is a bottom-up approach. National level first, and then regional level. Next, please. Effective measures to develop the EAPP long-term energy scenarios is through Planning Technical Committee members and other partners to ensure involvement of all EAPP members, utilities, ministries, and RECs. When I mean RECs, it's ESC and COMESA. The boundary of planning scenarios within EAPP, the scope of the long-term energy scenario is suggested in the terms of reference when submitted to the firms, which will do the assignment. Clean energy transition features is always considered in the terms of reference master plan. For example, the coming master plan will consider 2 components: spatial mapping of generation and transmission resources through EAPP region. The second one will be the benchmarking of countries. Next, please. Now, the second item will be the use of scenarios. The purpose of the use of scenarios building within EAPP is used for analyzing impacts of existing and planned generation sources on the infrastructure development priorities in the master plan, the operation readiness requirements of the power pool. The main purpose of EAPP long-term energy scenarios is to analyze and explore all scenarios, then come up with the best option for the power pool. For the communication of the scenario results, EAPP Planning Technical Committee members and RECs are involved in the development of scenarios, assumptions, and the scenario results through workshops predefined. Each step is always validated by the EAPP Planning Committee members and the other partners before taking further steps of the assignment. Transparency during development of the EAPP long-term energy scenarios is very crucial to ensure results are validated by all members. Next, please. For the scenarios capacity building within EAPP, General Secretariat yearly prepare capacity building for all members, and the capacity building is incorporated in the consultancy services related to the assignment as a standalone deliverable. Capacity building is always incorporated in the short-term action plan every 3 years, which is implemented every year. EAPP has dedicated a focal team in-house composed by a few of the EAPP Planning Committee members and the Secretariat staff for modeling to minimize costs used to pay consultants where possible. Next, please. Lessons for the Africa Continental Master Plan. Africa Continental, the coordination of all involved players during development of the CMP is very important. Long-term energy scenario needs to be agreed upon by all players. Development of the CMP needs an organization structure which is not complex for a better coordination and effective decision-making to avoid delays for the assignment between the consultant and the outdone part. Recommendation of the CMP need to be clear and easy to be understood by by decision makers for further actions, the recommended actions and scheduled plans. Next. Thank you for your attention. Over to you, Teach.
Well, thank you, Patrice, for that brief and concise presentation. I think you've given us a few more minutes, 5 more minutes, so that at least we can then have a more in-depth discussion. So the next presentation will be from the West African Power Pool, and this will be made by Mr. MED-TSO, and who is an electrical engineering design engineer and international development project manager with more than 25 years experience of professional experience in the development of and management of electrical projects, maintenance and operation of high voltage electrical networks. He previously worked at the electric company of Benin, where he was responsible for studies and planning of power generation and transmission infrastructure on behalf of Benin and Togo. And since 2015, he has been the head of the Studies and Planning and Project Finance Division at the West African Power Pool General Secretariat, where he is in charge of preparing regional projects and mobilizing funding for their implementation. So with that brief introduction, let me hand over to Bernard to make his presentation. So Bernard, over to you.
Merci. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Merci, Teach. Merci.
Yes, we can hear you, Bernard. You can go ahead.
Moi, j'irai en français. Et... Merci. Comme on vous l'a dit, je suis Bernard Hessou, le chef de la division études de planification et financement de projets au WAPP, au West African Power Pool. En français, c'est le système d'échange d'énergie électrique ouest africain. Je vais vous parler de mon côté du processus d'élaboration et d'adoption du plan directeur des moyens régionaux de production et de transport de l'énergie électrique de la CEDEAO, dont le WAPP est l'institution qui se charge de sa mise en œuvre, de son élaboration et de sa mise en œuvre. On peut évoluer? Donc, je rappellerai pourquoi le WAPP, puisque le WAPP, comme je l'avais dit, c'est le système d'échange d'énergie électrique ouest africain, WAPP en anglais. Pourquoi on l'a créé, ça sous-tend toutes nos activités, la stratégie et puis le processus d'élaboration du plan directeur régional. Oui. Allez-y. Next. Donc, pourquoi on a créé le OA? Ça fait partie d'un constat. On a vu que dans la région de la CEDEAO, il y a d'abondantes ressources énergétiques. Par contre, une inadéquation entre l'offre et la demande et la distribution inégalée des ressources énergétiques. Donc, les chefs d'État ont vu bon de se réunir, de mettre tout ça là ensemble pour pouvoir développer les infrastructures de production et de transport d'énergie et ensuite intégrer tous les systèmes nationaux dans un marché régional unifié pour une optimisation optimale, une utilisation optimale des ressources qu'on a dans la sous-région. Next. Donc, ouais, allez-y, pour cette stratégie, vous voyez, on a dit les ressources sont inégalées. Nous avons l'hydroélectrique qui est à l'ouest, le thermique, des ressources thermiques qui sont à l'est, et puis dans la bande sahélienne, nous avons les ressources solaires renouvelables. Donc, la stratégie est basée sur ça. Nous développons les sources là où, la production là où il y a la ressource primaire, c'est-à-dire les ressources, les projets solaires dans la bande sahélienne, les projets hydroélectriques à l'ouest, notamment en Guinée, les projets thermiques à l'est, notamment au niveau du Nigeria. Et puis, next, nous construisons les infrastructures nécessaires. Allez-y. La transition. Je disais, oui, on construit les infrastructures nécessaires pour amener l'énergie là où le besoin est. Next. Donc, la structure organisationnelle, allez-y pour remplir cela. Le WAPP est une institution spécialisée de la CEDEAO qui a pour mission de promouvoir et de développer les infrastructures régionales de production et de transport et d'assurer aussi la coordination des échanges entre les États membres. Donc, c'est une association des sociétés d'électricité. À ce jour, nous avons 36 membres répartis sur les 14 États continentaux de la CEDEAO avec un membre observateur qui est l'ONE du Maroc. La structure organisationnelle, nous avons une assemblée générale qui est constituée des DG des sociétés qui composent le WAPP, donc sociétés nationales comme privées. Nous avons le conseil exécutif qui fait office de conseil d'administration. Le conseil exécutif est épaulé dans son travail par des comités organisationnels qui sont formés, qui sont composés d'experts provenant des sociétés membres. Nous avons au total 5 comités organisationnels. Il y a le comité technique d'exploitation, le comité de planification stratégique et de l'environnement, le comité des finances, le comité des ressources humaines et gouvernance et le comité de distribution et commercialisation. Donc, ces comités sont composés d'experts provenant des sociétés qui conseillent le conseil exécutif qui donne des avis pour des avis techniques sur des documents qui lui ont été soumis. Vous avez le secrétariat général là où nous travaillons, où je travaille, qui s'occupe de la gestion quotidienne du système. Et nous avons 3 départements, le département du centre d'information et de coordination qui se charge de la mise en place du marché, le département administration et finances qui supporte tout, et puis le département planification, programmation des investissements et sauvegarde de l'environnement, là où je travaille, dans ce département que je suis, qui se charge de la mise en œuvre, de la planification d'abord, la programmation de la mise en œuvre des projets qui ont été retenus. Allons-y. Next. Suivant. Donc, notre stratégie, nous avons un plan directeur et nous avons aussi à mettre en œuvre, nous avons aussi le développement du centre d'information et de coordination. Donc, avec ces 2 entrants, nous élaborons des plans d'affaires du durée de 4 ans et avec pour objectif la mise en place du marché régional de l'électricité. Le plan directeur de ça, nous allons parler de comment ce plan, nous arrivons à le réaliser. Next. Pour le plan directeur, nous avons depuis, comme je l'ai dit, le WAPP, c'est depuis 2006, mais le premier plan directeur, c'est un plan directeur de la CEDEAO, c'est 2004. Quand le WAPP est établi en 2006, nous avons eu un plan directeur suivi par le WAPP en 2012. Le dernier plan que nous suivons maintenant, c'est le plan 2019-2033 qui a été adopté en décembre 2018. Pourquoi on actualise, on voit l'évolution de l'industrie électrique, l'évolution des stratégies dans les pays. On a vu en 2012 que la stratégie a évolué, il fallait une transition énergétique, de nouveaux objectifs ont été fixés en matière de pénétration des énergies renouvelables. Il y a de nouvelles initiatives dans la sous-région, par exemple le WAPP qui a été développé pour développer un corridor d'énergie renouvelable. Nous avons aussi dans le plan précédent l'évolution du projet de la mise en œuvre des projets régionaux allait vers une interconnexion totale des réseaux. Donc, il y a d'autres challenges, d'autres défis qui se dressent devant nous. Il avait été jugé bon d'élaborer, d'actualiser le plan qui avait été adopté en 2012 pour pouvoir intégrer toutes les évolutions des plans directeurs, notamment au niveau national, ces initiatives, la volonté des États à renforcer dans le mix énergétique les énergies renouvelables. Pour ce faire, allons-y. Donc, le WAPP n'a pas l'expertise, comme on le dit, in-house pour pouvoir faire ce travail. Nous recrutons un consultant. Bon, ça, le problème, c'est avoir le financement. Nous avons eu le financement. Si nous recrutons un consultant pour mener cette étude. Le consultant, avec l'équipe du WAPP, fait le tour de tous les pays pour pouvoir collecter les plans directeurs, voir l'avancement des projets qui avaient été précédemment définis, les nouvelles stratégies dans les pays, le niveau de satisfaction de la demande. Il s'entretient aussi avec tous les acteurs du secteur sur les perspectives, la vision, la politique, les défis qui ont été rencontrés dans les plans précédents. Il propose avec ça un plan de satisfaction de la demande à moindre coût au niveau régional et réalise après une étude économique afin d'identifier les investissements nécessaires et vérifier aussi que ces investissements en matière proposée permettent une exploitation fiable et stable du réseau. Puis, on fait une liste des projets prioritaires au niveau régional qu'il faut développer pour pouvoir satisfaire la demande. C'est, comme je le dis, c'est un plan de développement à moindre coût. La suite. Donc, pour pouvoir faire tout cela, il y a le comité, je vous avais parlé de l'organisation du WAPP, il y a le comité de planification stratégique et de l'environnement qui est comment dirais-je, la pièce maîtresse de ce processus. C'est lui qui prend, qui analyse avec ses experts, fait les commentaires avec l'équipe du WAPP toujours pour pouvoir conseiller le conseil exécutif pour endosser ce plan. Donc, avec ce comité, il y a les experts, nous désignons, il y a les experts de toutes les sociétés membres, ainsi que les ministères en charge de l'énergie qui sont impliqués dans la validation de tout ce qui a été, les investissements qui ont été proposés pour pouvoir satisfaire cette demande et pour pouvoir au niveau régional. Donc, tout cela est validé avec la commission de la CEDEAO, avec les organisations sous-régionales aussi intervenant dans le secteur. Et à une étape donnée, nous associons aussi les partenaires techniques et financiers pour avoir leur input, leurs observations sur la stratégie, le scénario qui a été proposé pour satisfaire la demande. Après quoi, si nous avons tout cela avec le quitus du comité de planification stratégique et de l'environnement, le plan est soumis au conseil exécutif de l'EOA qui fait office du conseil d'administration qui, après ces observations, le recommande à l'Assemblée générale de l'EOA. Donc, l'Assemblée générale de l'EOA, si l'Assemblée l'adopte, déjà, l'Assemblée générale, comme je l'avais dit, c'est composé des DG des sociétés. Donc, les experts des sociétés ont déjà vu ce dossier. il y a de fortes chances que ça soit approuvé. Le WAPP a ainsi terminé sa mission, sa maison fertière qui est la CEDEAO, la commission de CEDEAO, prend le relais maintenant parce que, comme je l'avais dit, c'est un plan régional, un plan de la CEDEAO prend le relais. D'abord, on réunit les ministres en charge de l'énergie pour pouvoir leur présenter le plan. Après leur input et leur adoption, ils passent au Parlement de la CEDEAO. Le Parlement de la CEDEAO l'endosse pour le Conseil des ministres de la CEDEAO. Et le point ultime, c'est le sommet des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de la CEDEAO qui l'adopte avec la prise d'un acte additionnel qui fait office de loi et qui est opposable à tous les pays. Donc, pour le dernier plan, cela a été adopté le 22 décembre 2018 lors du 54e sommet des chefs d'État et de gouvernement par cet acte additionnel. Et l'acte additionnel liste tous les projets prioritaires au niveau régional à développer, soit par le WAPP, soit par des pays ou des organismes sous-régionaux au sein de la CEDEAO pour qu'on puisse satisfaire la demande. Voilà, présenté brièvement notre processus pour l'élaboration de notre plan directeur. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernard, for that detailed presentation. I think it has really set the proper foundation for our discussions on the governance of the development of these long-term energy scenarios. So let me move on to the next presentation.
Mira, però bueno, escolta una cosa, et vaig a trucar per...
Sorry, I think there's some interference.
Sí.
Let me proceed to introduce Monsieur Emmanuel Bioe, who has been working for more than 20 years in the field of grid development, including 6 years in contributing to the Generation Adequacy Report on the electricity supply demand balance in France. He is chairman of the Technical Committee, Economic Studies and Scenarios from MED-TSO, the Association of Mediterranean Transmission Operators. He is in charge of leading mid and long-term power system scenario building and performing market studies. Previously, he has been the leader of the Technical, Economic and Probabilistic Studies team in the Transmission Grid Development Department of RTE. He managed the French 400 kV grid development studies from the long-term perspective to the committing date, and realized in the particular the long-run RTE for 400 kV master plan up to 2030. He holds an engineering degree from École Centrale de Lille in 1995 and a master's degree in the automatic and regulation from the University of Lille. So with that brief introduction, let me allow Emmanuel to make his presentation on behalf of MED-TSO. So over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Teach, for your introduction. Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my dear colleagues. Thank you for your invitation, for giving me the opportunity to present our MED-TSO experience in long-term scenario building. So yes, next slide. So some few words to introduce what is MED-TSO. MED-TSO was established in 2012 as a interconnection international cooperation platform, and now our members are the transmission system operator from the whole Mediterranean region. So you can see here on the left a map that cover the area of our members. So 19 countries, 21 members, TSO members, about 500 million people served, and 400,000 transmission kilometer transmission line. So you can also see on this map that I would say almost half of our members are also members of ENSOE, the European Association of Transmission System Operator. So what is the scope? What are the activity of MED-TSO? Our scope is to improve integration of the Mediterranean power system. So we work on different scope. So first is to try to make our effort to optimize the use of existing interconnection, and also to support or to assess the possibility to support the building of new interconnection, new line. So MED-TSO is organized with 5 different technical committees. So in terms of core activities, we work on a common technical rules for accessing the grid, for operating the system, and for sharing resources. So for that, we have 2 technical committees, TC regulation and TC operation, that works on, for example, on the ground for Mediterranean grid code. Along to that, we work on developing and supporting the development of grid through the preparation of a master plan and Mediterranean master plan. And I will come back on that later. What we do also is to support and to improve transparency, sharing of technical data, and then we are developing for that a web platform for sharing information between our members, and that to be open for full transparency. I want also to mention we have one technical committee that is fully dedicated on knowledge sharing, on training program, and that support all the other technical committee. And then finally, we are also developing some database to support exchange between members. I want also to mention one of our projects, that is the Mediterranean grid map. Grid map we develop in cooperation with ENSOE. So we benefit also from the support of the European Commission through 2 or 3 year grant contract. So here is mentioned MP1, MP2, so Mediterranean Project 1 and 2, and TZMED. TZMED is the current project to 2020 to 2022. And so we are in the 2nd year of this project. Next slide. So talking about the scenario, I want here to introduce the reason why developing scenarios. And clearly, those scenarios are developed to be the framework of the Mediterranean Master Plan. Here on the graph, what you can see is the synthetic presentation of our master plan from MP2. The last one that was released last year. So this map can show you what we consider as a project we want to study. So we are talking about interconnection study. as you can see here, project to cross the Mediterranean and to cover the full Mediterranean region. So we define what we call corridor. So for example, in the west, you can observe several projects, 1, 2, and 3 between Algeria, Morocco, Spain, and Portugal to connect Iberia with west of Maghreb. So we have several areas. I don't want to enter into detail. Everything, of course, is public, and I will develop later our communication on that. So master plan is something we do, we perform with through the activity of 2 technical committees. One I have pleasure to chair, TC Economic Studies and Scenario, where we build the scenario, and the other one is TC Planning, where our colleagues perform the grid studies. The aim of grid studies being to study project, and we are talking about infrastructure, so grid studies, and we also assess the need for internal reinforcement. So not only the specific interconnector between 2 countries, but also the reinforcement needed internally to the internal grid of all our members. So what we do in TCSS is to develop several scenarios. So here I mentioned 3 scenarios to address the Mediterranean power system in 2030. So power system 2030. That is our scope currently. And then the reason for having a scenario is to explore the opportunities for electricity exchange through the region. So electricity exchange is something that can be deducted from being the consequence of economic opportunity. So, but also complementarity. So we are talking about excess of energy. So for example, excess of renewable, or not excess, but surplus of renewable energy. We can talk also of the benefit of efficiency. So for example, efficiency coming from the most recent CCGT generation in competition with a more older power plant. We want also to explore a complementarity in terms of seasonality. For example, you know that in Europe, the peak is in winter, and the peak of demand is in winter, when in North Africa and in Middle East, the peak is more in summer. So it is this kind of complementarity that we want to assess through the scenario. We try also to assess different of time zone, and you know that the peak is not at the same time in every country. So all those things like that, or having windy region, or place where it is more the sun PV generation that is important. So if all those things create opportunity for electricity exchange, and it is what we want to assess and to build in our scenarios, and that is the fuel later for the grid studies. What we do also with those scenarios is, of course, to implement those scenarios in tools in order to be able to support the investment, because we are talking about very expensive project, hundreds of millions of euros, for example. So we need to support the investment from our TSO members by performing some calculation. So here I mentioned CBA, cost benefit analysis. What is that? It is to assess, so it's a monetary assessment of the benefit of linking or to reinforce exchange capacity between countries. So its benefit in terms of fuels in general. It is economy of fuels. It is also a benefit in terms of renewable integration. it is also some benefit in terms of a reduction of CO2 emission. So, and we do that also to address uncertainty. It is the reason why we perform all those studies through 3 scenarios to consider, of course, to address the uncertainty that is normal when we are talking about long-term planning. Okay, so that is the reason for having this activity, and it is done in a coordinated approach and process. It is what I want to develop in the next slide. Yes, so it is our scenario building is 2 year is a 2 year process. 15 countries are very involved. I mean, they are members of the TCSS. And then every our organization is based on the 3C approach: collaboration, contribution, and control. So it's a mix of bottom-up and top-down approach. So ESS, TCSS, where all the members are present and provide their expertise. TCSS is in charge of in a collaborative approach to define methodology, scenario building methodology, but also scenario definition and storyline. So in practical world, what we have is to organize several workshops, physical before COVID, or now it's distance workshop, but workshop to build in common scenario definition and storyline. And that storyline is the background that will ensure the global coherency of the scenario to cover all the region. What we do also in common is to define common assumption. For example, fuel price, CO2 price, plant efficiency. All those things are things we define in common. And then it will be the responsibility then for the member to perform the data collection at the national level. And then when the data collection is performed, come back to TCSS as a whole, and we start internally with our internal resource, we perform the modeling. So what we provide to our members is tools, I mean software. For example, for load forecast, we have some tools for that. What we provide also is database. Database is something that is absolutely crucial. And what is database is weather database. So it's a database with temperature, with irradiation for solar, with wind, with hydro, we have hydro inflow, for example. And so you know that all those physical dimension are so crucial for the power system. So we have a longer database that is common, that covers the full region, and that is absolutely crucial for modeling. So TCSS performs the modeling. We have also a very important activity that is coordination with our stakeholders. And here I mentioned ENSOE, that is absolutely crucial, because all the European part of the model is performed also by ENSOE. And then when this modeling is finished, we enter in a validation phase. And again, it is the responsibility of every member to validate the result. And so in practical terms, what we do is to have 2 rounds, round A, round B. So at the end of the round A, there is an intermediate validation, and we open the door. We allow our members to update or to adjust their data collection, for having at the end the result that we commonly validate. That is for the process. Next slide. Yes, so some words about capacity building, because capacity building is absolutely, it's one of the pillars of MED-TSO. There is a technical committee that fully support that. It is very important. It is also very important for the achievement of TCSS activity. So what we do is to try to develop skills for addressing the energy transition. That means in particular to develop what we call a probabilistic approach, probabilistic studies. That is very absolutely important when you want to address variability of renewable. Definitely absolutely crucial. So we organize a training session. We provide tools, and we try to work with open source tools, and we share the database as I mentioned before. So it is important for our members, fully appreciate to benefit this capacity building program. It is also very important for one other thing that is crucial. As I mentioned before, we expect from all our members to be able to control the result. And to be able to control, it's important that every country has equal capability to control. And then it is important to have skills, but also to have tools. And what you can see here on this graph is one example of the tool we use. It is a viewer. It is a viewer. Here it is 5 days. So our time step is hourly. We perform hourly studies covering a full year. So it is presentation here. It is generation in Tunisia. I think it's an example of Tunisia, where you can see wind, solar, gas generation, import and export in gray. So this kind of tool is absolutely crucial to give all our members capability to control, and control is very important for the validation. Here it is also mentioned anti-rest simulator. It is a tool we use for modeling power system. Yes, next slide to conclude with the communication. We had 1 year ago a series of webinars to present the Mediterranean Master Plan 2020. We also prepare several reports, and we have a dedicated website for that. So here you have the link to this website, and that is a entry page where you can download the master plan report. You can download the scenario report, and you have also access to the full detail of master plan. So the next slide give you some examples. So here I select some information from one of our projects between Spain and Morocco. It's to reinforce the existing interconnection with a new cable. So we have a project sheet, description of the project by itself. It's description, additional transmission capacity, expected commissioning date, its price, also or its cost. That is a pure description. On the right, we have the CBA indicators, so cost benefit indicators in terms of variation of social economic welfare. So it is monetary indicators, also race curtailment avoided, CO2 variation, and we have some indication about yearly marginal price. That is a pure example. And on the left bottom, it's an example of a dynamic map where you can click. And I invite you to go on this website. You click on the country, or you click on the link, and you will get dynamic information about what is inside the country in terms of generation capacity, and or information about interconnection. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. Thank you for your attention. I invite you also to follow MED-TSO through our social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course you can go on our MED-TSO website. We try to be as far as possible transparent and to communicate our activities and our result. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think that was right on time. It's 1 o'clock now, and so that takes us to the next session of this session, which is the moderated discussion. But before we open up now, I would want to confirm with Asami that we've got 30 minutes, and this should last until 1:30. Kindly confirm, Asami, if that's correct.
We are a little bit behind of time. If you could try to do it in 20 minutes, that would be appreciated.
Excellent. Thanks, Asami. So I think the first question relates to governance. And I think in ECOWAS presentation, I think we were very detailed in terms of how the scenario development process is governed by the fact that you have a General Assembly, you have an Executive Council, you have subcommittees, and the planning subcommittee is the one that leads the development of the scenarios, which are then taken to the Executive Council for approval, and then the board, which then takes to the General Assembly, the Parliament, and then leading to the Summit of Heads of State. And I think my question goes to Patrice. Maybe if you could also briefly explain how the governance of the scenario development in East Africa works. So over to you, Patrice.
Thank you, Teach. As I mentioned in my presentation, EAPP, since its establishment, it has conducted only 2 power system master plans. But country members, they prepare their own master plans, which are incorporated to the EAPP regional power system master plan. For the 2 power system master plan, the way it was done in 2011, it was done through a consultancy service and worked together with the technical committee members of planning. For the second one, it was a twinning arrangement, which was done by the consultant and the all member utilities. Then they discussed around the scenarios and which one to be considered. That one came up with the 21 scenarios with the baseline. Yeah, that's the way it is done, the governance. It's through the technical committee members, which is comprising all utilities. Yes, the 14 utilities.
No, thank you, Patrice. Before I think I will ask Emmanuel the same question. While still on EAPP, Patrice. So once the member states submit the data to the technical committee, you develop the master plan. What then happens after that? How is it approved through the East African community governance structures? The East African Power Pool governance structures.
Yeah, the way it is done through the TOR, there are different deliverables. When they start by methodology, it should be approved and validated by all members. Then they continue the further steps. It means at the end, all members will be in during the development of any such study. Yeah, and each step is validated before considering another one.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks, Patrice. Let me give you a break a little bit before I come back to you and move on to MED-TSO. Emmanuel, you mentioned that most of the modeling is done by the TCESS. And what is the governance structure like? How is this? Yeah, and you also mentioned that this consists of the utilities. Is there any beyond that structure of the TSSE? Is there any ministerial council that then once the scenarios have been the the master plans have been developed, is there any ministerial council that then approves these the master plan?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So, yes, starting with the governance of our scenario process. First, everything starts from guidelines. So we have several rules for preparing, for building those scenarios, but also for performing the grid studies and to finalize the master plan. So those guidelines were prepared in common between TCSS and TC Planning years ago, and have been submitted to the governance body of MED-TSO and approved in General Assembly. So we rely on common a base of common rules. That is the main guarantee for following a strict process, I would say. Oh, yes. And so that is for the general framework of developing those scenario, and then later the validation really come from our members. So it is a process, as I mentioned before, on 2 years, but with some very precise time for validation. I mean that we open the door for yes. So we have a very strict data collection, then implementation, then validation. And we repeat this process 2 times in order that at the end, we have the full validation from all our members. And then at this moment, it becomes again a collective validation.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I think that brings us to the next question that we wanted to ask in terms of how these scenarios are defined at regional level. I think, Emmanuel, you've mentioned that you have a 2-pronged approach, a bottom-up approach as well as a top-down approach. And these the guidelines are defined, and then these are then the ones that use to develop your master plan. And Bernard, you also explained in your presentation that you use a bottom-up approach, but once the master plan has been approved, then it's binding for all the member states. So my question to you is, how is the scope of the methodology as well as the scenarios that you consider in your master plan defined? Are they defined at member state level, or are they defined at regional level? So over to you, Bernard.
Merci. Pour ce qui concerne la stratégie, comme je l'avais expliqué tout à l'heure, ça part du bas au niveau des pays avec les plans nationaux, les plans directeurs nationaux. C'est la base. Si un pays a un plan directeur, c'est la base d'abord pour pouvoir élaborer le plan directeur au niveau régional. Donc, c'est cette base-là qu'on prend à partir de la demande et à partir des analyses, voir quel est le plan de satisfaction de la demande à moindre coût. Ça peut amener au niveau national à abandonner certains projets qui étaient dans le plan national. Ça peut amener à les abandonner et ça se discute avec le pays ou opter pour un plan régional qui puisse satisfaire la demande à moindre coût. Donc, cette discussion se fait avec chaque pays et après, on vient avec un plan au niveau régional pour satisfaire la demande. Je ne sais pas si...
No, it does actually, and I think it's also in line with the second question that I wanted to ask in terms of the use of the scenarios. earlier on, in your presentation, you stated that one of the key considerations that you make when you are designing your master plan, you look at the resources across the region, and I think you mentioned that you've got hydropower in the west, you've got thermal energy in the east, you then have solar in the north. And then also, Emmanuel, in your presentation, you stated that these scenarios, you look at the opportunities of exchange electricity trade between your member states, and I think which is a common objective amongst all of the panelists. And then you also look at the benefits of efficiency, benefits of complementarity, support investment, and in addressing uncertainty. So maybe my question to Bernard and Patrice, could you also then elaborate on the purposes of this scenario building from your power pools perspective, in terms of how you build consensus, how you raise the target ambitions, as well as how you plan the infrastructure development and explore alternatives. So let me start with Patrice.
Yeah. Thank you, Teach. As I mentioned, everything we do for any studies conducted, especially for the Continental Master Plan, the consensus is between all the involved parties, the planning committee especially. When needed, we can also add operations, technical committee members, but also the RECs, like ESC and the COMESA. The outcome of that will be validated and communicated to upper levels. Yeah. But we make sure all parties are involved and it's agreed upon any step we are doing. Thank you.
No, thank you, Patrice. And Bernard, maybe from the WAPP perspective, how are these scenarios then used in your planning for planning for the master plan?
Oui, bon, au niveau du WAPP, comme je l'avais dit tout à l'heure, c'est des discussions avec les pays et ça peut amener à abandonner certains choix au début, mais c'est des discussions, puisque nous commençons les discussions au niveau technique. Et surtout avec la technique, c'est clair, la décision, pour prendre les décisions, ce n'est pas trop difficile parce que c'est au niveau politique que ça peut poser des problèmes, mais au niveau technique, nous avons toujours des discussions franches et bien documentées avec les techniciens, avec les pays au niveau ministériel, surtout au ministère de l'Énergie et les sociétés nationales qui sont chargées de mettre en œuvre la politique énergétique des pays. Nous discutons avec eux pour voir les choix, les stratégies, les objectifs qui ont été fixés au niveau national et aussi les aligner sur les objectifs au niveau régional ou international. Donc, avec ces discussions, si on se met d'accord, on adopte la stratégie et généralement, quand on vient au niveau politique, si l'argumentaire est bien documenté, ça passe normalement. Donc, je dirais que d'abord, c'est le consensus au niveau des techniciens. D'abord, une étude bien documentée, bien fournie, pour qu'un pays abandonne un projet au profit d'un projet régional, il faut donner les preuves. Et c'est ce travail qui est fait par les études techniques, les études économiques pour montrer la pertinence du choix du scénario qu'on propose pour la région. Donc, surtout à ce niveau, et jusque-là, nous avons pu réussir, mais la suite nous dira, parce qu'au niveau, bien sûr qu'au niveau de la mise en œuvre, il y a des difficultés inhérentes à chaque plan et nous sommes obligés de réajuster des fois et ça marche. Merci.
No, thank you very much. I think this is an interesting discussion, but we're only left with 5 minutes now in our discussion. So let's quickly move on to the last two questions that we have for this session. The first one deals with capacity building. And I think for Bernard, you mentioned that the approach that you use is that you get a consultant, they work with the member states and your subcommittee to develop the master plan. Patrice, you also mentioned that for the last master plan that you developed, it was a collaborative effort between EAPP, your power utilities, and the consultant. And Emmanuel, I think you mentioned that the planning is done internally through the ESS, and then in addition to the planning, you provide training sessions to your member states. You provide tools as well as the data that is used, and I assume that the modeling is done by the member states within by your member utilities within the ESS. Is that correct? Not as opposed to the use of consultants.
Years ago, we used to have the support of a consultant for those for model implementation, and then 4 or 5 years ago we decided inside the TCSS to invest, I would say, because it is time to invest in gaining our own autonomy in performing the studies by ourselves. So at that moment, we start a training program, and we got the support from RT, the French TSOs, in providing training session with experts to learn about the tool we use. So the tool we use is Antares. It is modeling tool for power system. And then now we have internally a team, a dedicated team internally to performing the modeling. And then we generate the result, and every member has some tools, so in particular some viewers, to analyze, to go deeply in the result of the modeling. So we play with this complementarity between the tool by itself that is operated internally, but by our own, and all the members that can use the tool or that can use a visualization tool to see the result. So yes, now we are in full autonomy in performing the modeling by ourselves. I want also to mention that skill is important, tool is important. So I mean training the tool, but the database is also crucial, because if you don't have data, you can have the best tool as possible. That has no benefit. So we work also to prepare to propose and to share database. I was mentioning before temperature, irradiation, wind, etc. That is also crucial, and that is also very important that capacity building is mixed with tools and the data. If you have only part of that, it does not work. It is very important to think the 3 items in a global approach. That is our experience.
Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel. I think we are left with 1 minute now to this session. So let me combine now. Let me allow you to give your last word, but I'll confine it to 2 things. I'll start with Bernard. For all of you, actually. For Bernard, capacity building, based on what we have heard from MED-TSO as well as the experience, how can we adapt this for WAPP, but also in the development of the continental power systems master plan? In 1 minute, Bernard, over to you. You're muted, Bernard. Maybe if you could unmute yourself.
Merci, merci. Je dirais que pour le renforcement de capacité est une chose importante pour nous et nous avons le souci de faire aussi, ou comme EAPP l'a dit aussi, de faire notre plan directeur in-house. On s'attelle pousse, c'est pourquoi la coopération avec Aouda pour le plan directeur continental, l'approche nous intéresse effectivement. Former les gens au niveau du secrétariat du WAPP et avoir aussi des démembrements, des gens formés au niveau des sociétés nationales qui sont chargées de la mise en œuvre du plan et au niveau des ministères qui définissent la politique énergétique des pays, avoir des représentants là-bas formés pour qu'un comité comme ça, à la base, les discussions puissent être faites et au moins pour la première étape, commencer par faire les ajustements à notre plan avant la mise à jour approfondie qui pourrait se faire dans un délai de 8 ou 10 ans pour que nous puissions être plus efficaces dans le suivi et la mise en œuvre de nos plans directeurs. Merci.
Thank you very, very much, Bernard. Patrice, in 1 minute, how in terms of capacity building, how can you, what is the perspective of EAPP and how can this also be integrated into the development of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan?
Yeah, thank you, Teach. EAPP General Secretariat is working very hard to make sure that what is possible to be done in-house to be undertaken by the utilities, coordinated by the General Secretariat. We are trying to build up the capacity building. We are trying to get tools, as you're aware of it, and so that we are building our database so that we can undertake such activities where it's needed. We are trying to do it. It will take time, but we are trying to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrice. Emmanuel, you've already given a detailed description of your capacity building effort. And 2 questions to you. I think there was a question on the questions and questions and answers. Do you provide training to power pools on the use of some of your tools? And then also, how can the development of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan benefit from your experience?
Okay, so yeah, in terms of training, of course, MED-TSO is open to cooperation with other associations, and we would like to, yes, we would enjoy to have a cooperation, and that kind of cooperation, of course, training and sharing capacity building is something we can consider. Of course, it would be a pleasure.
No, thank you very much. I think with those remarks, I think that concludes this session. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go through the questions, all the questions that are in the that have been posted in the questions and answers. So I think still on that last point, I should also mention that through our cooperation with the IRENA and IAEA, we are also providing capacity building in the use of message and SPLAT for generation planning and modeling. And I think if this is something that the power pools would want us to expand on, we can always look into that as part of the development of the Continental Power Systems Master Plan. So with that, let me hand over to Asami, and I want to thank the panelists for the insightful insights that they have given us in this discussion. So over to you, Asami. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tish, and thank you for all the speakers for very informative discussion. I wanted to give a short summary of the discussion, but because of the time, I will leave that to the end. I would now like to introduce the moderator for the next session, Mr. Peter Kinutia. He's a senior energy advisor of the African Union Commission, and he himself has many years of experience working in the regional community. So therefore, the best person to moderate this session with regional economic communities. So thank you, Peter, and yeah, please start the discussion.
Very much, Asami, and good afternoon and good day, depending on your time zone, wherever you are joining us from. And thank you also to my colleague Teach for moderating the previous session so ably and making our work in this session much easier because there are many synergies and many linkages between our two sessions. This webinar series, of course, is happening in the context of what is going on in terms of the development of the Continental Power System Master Plan, which is a collaboration between it's by the African Union through the African Union Development Agency, supported by the EU TAF and Get Transform, providing the modeling support, modeling tool, but support also coming from IRENA and IAEA. And this also fits to the African single electricity market, which was launched last year, with the AFSEM providing the framework and the CMP providing the hardware infrastructure. So in this session, we are going then to discuss what the RECs are doing and the roles that they are playing in long-term energy scenario planning. And we want to see that the linkages that exist, because we know that this process requires creation from the national level to the regional level as we climb towards the continental level. And the synergies are there, and it's also important that any weakness in that chain weakens the entire system, and that is why we have the RECs with us today to discuss what they are doing and what can be further strengthened, and how institutions like IRENA can continue to, or can be able to further strengthen these processes. We have three panelists from the regional economic communities. I will introduce all of them first, and then we can engage in a discussion that hope to address these issues. We'll mostly look at the linkages. Then we will also look at how are the RECs integrating the just transition in the LTES, the long-term energy planning system. And are you focusing only on electricity, or you're focusing on energy in general? And then we will try to link this up as we close on how this can benefit the Continental Power System Master Plan, and conversely also how the Continental Power System Master Plan can benefit the regional and planning, and also the national planning. Let me start by introducing my friend Moses Damele from SADC. He's a senior program officer responsible for energy with SADC since 2014, and before that with the Department of Energy in Lesotho for another 7 years. So we are very highly experienced energy program officer. Then I would also like to introduce my friend and former colleague, Elsa Mturia Habwe, a very experienced hand in energy with over 30 years experience at national and regional level. First in his home country of Uganda, and then with the East African community for the last 12 years. And we are privileged to be joined by Mr. Tion Lamin from ECOWAS, who will be giving the Western Africa perspective, who is also stepping in for his director, WA. So my colleagues, when I give you the floor, it would be, if your bandwidth allows, you could have your camera on so you can interact with the participants, and also to remind the participants that French-English interpretation is available so that you're able to contribute in the language you are most comfortable in. And finally, also to invite the participants to post questions and comments in the Q&A section of the Zoom. As we did not have the SAP in the previous session, I would like to start with you, Moses, to tell us what's the coordination process within the Southern Africa region, and which institutions and who plays which role, and what are the links between the national level building to the regional level in your long-term energy planning scenarios? And are you focusing only on energy, only on electricity, or are you incorporating energy in its totality? So Moses, if you could take maybe 1 or 2 minutes so that we can spend our time wisely. Also, may I remind you also, or request you to be as brief as you can in responding to your questions, as directly as you can, so that we can cover as much as possible. So Moses, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to all participants and the moderators. As you already introduced us, I'm Moses Ntlamele, at SADC Secretariat based in Gaborone, Botswana. In our case, at SADC region, representing here, are working for 16 member states, 12 mainland and 4 SNCC member states. The approach when it comes to energy is we take energy in totality without single out one form of energy, like in the case of power or electricity. So as you also indicated, our colleagues from SAP, that's Southern African Power Pool, which is a subsidiary organization of SADC, based in Harare, Zimbabwe, could not be part of the previous session, but that is well understandable because the apology was received due to, they could not be there due to other issues. In SADC, there are strategic documents that very high level, which have been adopted by our summit of heads of state and government. In our case, at this point in time, we're working, everything that we develop is being driven or guided by the SADC Regional Indicative Strategy and Development Plan, RSDP. We just had one that has been adopted for 2020 to 2030. We had the previous one from 2005 to 2020. So these strategic documents are the one which cover the entire development goal of SADC. We also have other strategic documents like the industrialization strategy and roadmap. These are at a high level, but now coming to a sectoral level, that is energy. The energy sector of SADC is driven by the policy, which is, in our case, it's a protocol in energy. That's commitment of SADC member states in terms of cooperation. So coming down now into the electricity subsector, the approach that we adopt in terms of developing the energy master plans and the scenarios is to ensure alignment so that all these documents, they talk to each other. There's no misalignment between the two, so that between all of them, so that they complement. And to what we also do at regional level, that's at SADC level, before developing any strategic document, we also look into what is being advocated at continental level. We know that there's a vision or Agenda 2063 at continental level. We also look into at global level, at UN level. We have the SDGs that were adopted in 2015, targeting 2030. All these are taken into consideration when developing the policy at SADC level. So the energy program in itself at SADC is very broad. It covers all sectors of energy, starting from renewables, oil and gas, the power sector, and all sub-programs such as biofuels, bioenergy, biomass. We can mention all of them, but it's all in totality that we are looking into. I may, maybe, yes, I'll be guided by your questions, because I didn't get into the issue of how the master plan, in particular the sub-master plan, generation transmission master plan was developed, and the processes that we took in order for it to be adopted as a regional strategic document that we are implementing now, between now and 2040.
Thank you, Moses. Yes, indeed, we will come back to that issue of adoption. Allow me to now invite Tion Lamin to also give us a perspective from ECOWAS. Tion Lamin, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, moi, je suis Lamin Thioune, je suis le chef de mission du programme d'amélioration de la gouvernance dans les 15 États membres de la CEDEAO et conseiller de M. Dabiré, de la gouvernance, de l'électricité, des énergies renouvelables, sur les questions de régulation, mais également nous avons un autre expert au WAPP. Alors, nous, ce qu'on voudrait peut-être rapidement aborder, c'est parce que le WAPP a déjà parlé du programme, du master plan, c'est que la CEDEAO a entamé une réactualisation de sa politique énergétique. Donc, une équipe de consultants a été recrutée. Les travaux sont assez avancés. Donc, on est presque à l'étape de cette politique-là. Bon, mais cette politique, le processus d'élaboration s'est fait par étapes. Il y a une grande étape de collecte des données au niveau de tous les pays membres. Ces données ont été validées au niveau électrique, hydrocarbures, tout ce qui concerne l'environnement juridique et réglementaire, la régulation. Un rapport détaillé qui a été validé dans un programme régional. Alors, sur base de cette étape de collecte de données, le consultant a fait les premiers travaux pour définir, sur la base des données collectées, des données existantes, sur la période 2020-2050. Alors, c'est le modèle libre qui a été utilisé par le consultant. 2 scénarios ont été analysés par le consultant. Un scénario tendanciel qui vise à prolonger la tendance actuelle, mais tenir compte des changements en cours sans intervention majeure sur les questions de pénétration significative et de transition modeste vers des formes d'énergie. Maintenant, le scénario transition verte qui intègre les politiques, les stratégies des pays de gaz à effet de serre. Les hypothèses sont formulées aussi pour mettre en adéquation avec les lignes directrices, les principes fondamentaux de la politique régionale, compatibles avec le développement économique et social. Alors, ce scénario de transition verte considère un taux d'accès à l'électricité et aux combustibles modernes plus important que dans le scénario de référence et tenir compte également des disparités régionales, milieu rural, milieu urbain. Alors, les résultats sur la base de la situation de référence où le gaz naturel constituait 41% de la production d'électricité, les énergies renouvelables hors hydro 3%, l'hydroélectrique 19%, et puis le reste fuel, gaz naturel, etc. Sur la période, les analyses qui ont été faites à partir du modèle mix montrent que le mix énergétique va connaître des changements fondamentaux en profondeur. La planification qui a été faite et de planification montre qu'au cours de la période de 2020-2030, la part des produits pétroliers dans le mix va fortement baisser et devenir marginale à partir de 2035. Au niveau des zones rurales, les principales informations tirées de cette planification, c'est que les systèmes individuels, les micro et mini-réseaux alimentés par les énergies renouvelables vont se substituer aux groupes électrogènes fonctionnant aux produits pétroliers. Le gaz naturel va continuer à occuper une place importante à celle des énergies renouvelables à partir de 2044. La part de l'hydroélectrique va diminuer du fait des efforts significatifs dans les énergies renouvelables sans hydroélectrique. Les prévisions 2050 qui découlent donc de cette planification montrent que le gaz naturel va occuper 30% de la production d'électricité. Les énergies renouvelables hors hydroélectricité, 59%. Et l'hydro, dont la quantité augmentera fortement, mais en pourcentage, il va se situer à 9%. Donc, voilà les scénarios. On a concerne la substitution et l'accès aux formes d'énergie au niveau des ménages ruraux et des ménages urbains. Alors, on note une forte régression des énergies traditionnelles et une augmentation de l'électricité qui est multipliée par 4 et le GPL par 8 au niveau des ménages urbains. Au niveau des ménages ruraux, forte régression du bois de feu qui est divisé par 5,5 et une forte augmentation des énergies modernes au niveau des ménages ruraux. L'électricité multipliée par près de 10 et le gaz naturel, le gaz de pétrole liquéfié pour l'utilisation moderne, à peu près multiplié par 19%. Qui ressortent de la politique énergétique qui est en train d'être finalisée. Nous espérons que d'ici le mois de juin, cette politique-là va être adoptée. Elle est basée sur les politiques nationales et un certain nombre de stratégies au niveau institutionnel, économique et financier, et mobilisation des ressources financières, mais aussi un aspect important de production à moindre coût à mettre à la disposition des des ménages. Les enjeux identifiés des énergies renouvelables, le développement des infrastructures et l'accès à l'électricité et l'appui à l'opérationnalisation et au développement du marché régional, la sécurité d'approvisionnement à court terme et à moyen et court terme. Voilà globalement les orientations, stratégies et politiques nationales sur la base desquelles la politique régionale va se faire et un certain nombre de principes directeurs a été retenu pour cette politique. Je ne vais pas continuer à mobiliser la parole, mais la coopération et la cohérence régionale, l'accès aux énergies modernes propres et abordables constituent des aspects importants des principes, le développement des énergies renouvelables, l'efficacité énergétique, la gouvernance et la transparence des activités, mobilisation des ressources financières, promotion du secteur privé et partenariat public, développement durable et préservation de l'environnement, promotion des genres, égalité, développement des compétences dans le secteur de l'énergie et subsidiarité importante et plus efficace que l'action régionale. Voilà ces derniers principes-là qui guident la politique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamin. As I give the floor to Elsam, I'd like to just mention that we thank you very much, Lamin, for sharing with us that detailed process and even the outcomes of the various processes that you have done. Maybe just to mention that at this time, or in this specific webinar, we would like to not go so much into the technical aspects of it, but more of the details of how you coordinate the processes to ensure the inclusivity of all the different parties, how the national and the regional links, and how after that arrangement, you ensure that the outcome also gets back to the member states to implement the outcomes. So with this clarification, I would like to give the floor to Elsam to give us the story from East Africa. Elsam, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. As earlier introduced, I'm Elsam Triahabwe, Senior Energy Officer, East African Community Secretariat. Regarding the subject today, EAC's role, or the regional office's role, is coordination.
Sorry, Elsam, if you're able to, if your bandwidth allows, you could have your camera on. If not, you may proceed.
I'm unable to have the camera on.
It's fine, proceed. We are hearing you well.
Yes. So the EAC Secretariat gets the mandate from the EAC Treaty, Article 01. And at the regional level, we have a number of instruments that we use that coordinate the partner states. One of them is, which has been already talked about, the Regional Power System Master Plan. My colleague Patrice has done a wonderful job on that one. Two, we have the EAC cross-border electrification policy, which helps partner states to electrify communities and towns that are in the border using a national grid from a neighboring country. We have the EAC Energy security policy framework, which also helps to guide the partner states when they are formulating their projects and programs. We have the regional strategy on scaling up access to modern energy services. This one was prepared 2005 in line with the MDGs, but when you look at the targets, it is still a live document, still in line with the SDGs. And last but not least, we have the EAC climate change policy and plan, which helps us in developing the energy sector in an environmentally friendly manner. So in brief, those are the documents that we have. And moderator, as you may be aware, at the regional level, we normally do projects and programs agreed on by the partner states through our meetings. And the setup of the sector at the regional level is that we have 3 working groups. That is the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Working Group, Fossil Fuel Working Group, and the Power Working Group. And these working groups are expected to meet quarterly and then meet twice a year at the Sectoral Council on Energy, where they report to the Energy Committee that reports to the Permanent Secretaries meeting, and the Permanent Secretaries report to the Ministers meeting for guidance. So in brief, without going into projects and programs, that is how we coordinate with the partner states. And then we as a region, as you may be aware, we also coordinate with the African Union through meetings like MEPAD, IPPF, AUDA, and so forth, in order to fit within the continental plan. And of course, our projects on power interconnectors, for example, the ZTK, that is the Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, which will be connecting SAP with the EAPP, will still be a very important line for the continental master plan. Maybe with that brief introduction, I can stop there for now. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Elsam. And it's clear that each of the regional economic communities, they have structures that enable the coordination between the national level and the regional level. So in closing, I will give each of you, let's say 30 seconds to tell us, now that we are doing the Continental Power System Master Plan, what do you see from your region that can contribute to this Continental Power System Master Plan process? And also, how can this master plan process feed back to your national process? A loaded question, but just 30 seconds each, which is also your closing remark because of our time constraints. Let me just start again with Moses and then Tion, and then we close with Elsam. Moses.
Thank you very much, moderator. As indicated even in our introduction, in the SADC, we have this subsidiary organization, SAP, RERA, SACRE, KJRTC. And in the case of Continental Master Plan, there are 2 institutions that play a very vital role, SAP and RERA. RERA on the regulatory issues and the grid code. But SAP is also part of the core team that is working the Continental Master Plan. For us at SADC, we see the Continental Master Plan as a bigger continental instrument that will be able to link the regional economic master plan, that is like in the case of SAP, case of SADC. Then once our regional master plan is simply implemented, this will fit into the continental. We still have the outstanding or pending issues at the regional level, which we have to address. Like in our case, we still have some member states that are not connected to the SAP2, even those which are in the mainland. This is very critical to have the continental one be integrated or being aligned to the one at regional level. It's very critical and very important for us to look into what is happening in the continental and reflect or mirroring what is happening at the regional level, even at national level. This is going to play a very important role, and we are participating that as a right, but participating through our subsidiary organizations in that process. This is highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Lamin, you have 30 seconds. I think you're muted.
Non, c'est activé, non?
Yes, yes.
Je peux commencer? Oui. Donc, pour ce qui concerne la coordination du processus, je pense que pour l'élaboration du plan directeur du WAPP, mon collègue de WAPP a un peu passé en revue le schéma de travail du secrétariat du WAPP qui est chargé de la mise en œuvre du plan régional d'infrastructure sur l'électricité. S'agissant maintenant de l'aspect coordination au niveau de la politique, en fait, nous avons au niveau des États des points focaux qui sont désignés, et ces points focaux travaillent avec la direction de l'énergie et des mines de la CEDEAO sur les questions de collecte de données, les questions de validation de l'analyse des politiques nationales et de leur mise en cohérence avec les stratégies au niveau régional et les enjeux qui sont identifiés. C'est ce processus de coordination-là qui est opérationnalisé après à travers des ateliers régionaux de validation qui constituent l'aspect important pour la coordination. Maintenant, les travaux d'interconnexion, je pense que mon ami du WAPP en a parlé. Donc, le WAPP est une société, est une structure des sociétés d'électricité et la coordination pour la mise en œuvre des projets et les choix de projets se font à travers les instances de cette structure-là. Voilà.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Elsam, as briefly as you can, crisp and short. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'll be very brief. As you may be aware, the regional power system master plan is being updated, and we agreed that as they update the power system master plan, it should be a bottom up, so they will use the national master plans to update the regional power system master plan, and then we shall continue implementation of the priority projects under the power system master plan, that is for generation and power interconnectors, as we coordinate with the other power pools, so that we have a smooth energy sector development that will fit in within the continental master plan. I think that's what I can say for now. Thank you for moderating the session. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Elsam. Colleagues, you'll agree with me that these three gentlemen, Moses, Mr. Lamin, and Elsam, have given us a very clear picture of the processes that they undertake. And I invite you to join me in thanking them for their contributions as I hand it back to Asami. Asami, you can take over.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the speakers. I wish that we had more time to discuss, but we hope to continue the discussion elsewhere. We keep working with the continental institutions, and we look forward to continued discussion. So because we are a bit behind the time, I would like to invite Dr. Dolph Gielen, Director of the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, to conclude this event.
Yeah, thank you very much, Asami, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thanks to all the speakers for the excellent presentations and the discussions. Today's session concludes the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Africa webinar series, and throughout these 6 sessions, we've had the privilege of hearing experiences of 9 countries and 6 different institutions with regard to their energy planning and scenario development practices in Africa. We gained many insights regarding the country's experience with developing national plans, and due to the abundance of natural resources and the decreasing installation cost, renewables form the backbone of many of these national plans. Several countries presented their institutional configurations that are characterized by the unique composition of stakeholders and how they engage them into this process. And governments are also working thoroughly with international bodies to develop their own capacities in modeling and using scenarios. You've seen newly established in-house modeling teams within government agencies that can allow countries to really take the ownership of their own modeling work for the future. We've also learned about some of the key components of this process, such as ensuring high data quality, constant updates, the need for transparency, and robust interinstitutional cooperation. In the session today, we have learned how the regional bodies, such as the power pools and economic communities, can play a role in facilitating and coordinating the energy planning process across member states through the coordinated development of national and also regional master plans. We heard the importance of dialogue, transparency, and clarity regarding the process of developing scenarios and the need for stakeholders' engagement. Scenarios are used by the power pools to identify the infrastructure needs and also to maximize the benefits of interconnections. The process of developing scenarios allows regional level coordination, both at the technical and at the political level. Each power pool highlighted the importance of having a good governance structure, stakeholder engagement, and a good communication strategy. And I think that's also clear from the discussion is that there is a clear trend to internalizing this scenario development process, and clearly there are advantages to that, such as a higher autonomy and a better understanding of these scenarios and the uncertainties related to these scenarios. And data sharing mechanism is very, very important. That also came up. So within the LTES network, we aim to bring together government planners from around the globe to share their experiences and practices to facilitate the transfer of knowledge between experts with the common aim of advancing the energy transition. So we've delved a bit deeper through this set of webinars, into the African context. This was the second such a set of regional dialogues, and we hope to expand that also to other regions who then can build also on the experience we have learned from the African context. So thanks again to the speakers who took part in this series for all the useful insights. And together with the partners, we will look to compile the insights into a synthesis report in the coming months, which can hopefully be of use to energy planners all around. So again, I would like to give a great thanks to the implementation partners who ensured the success of the series: African Union Commission, African Union Development Agency, African Development Bank, PET Transform, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and the Kenyan Ministry of Energy. So now I would like to close the session with playing a short video. Thanks for joining, and I hope to see you again in another LTES event.
The world energy is changing. The energy system of the future will be based on sustainable, renewable energy. Innovation and digitalization are changing the way we consume energy. How can decision makers in governments and businesses prepare for the energy transition? Long-term energy scenarios, LTES, can help plan for a low-carbon future by identifying opportunities, potential risks, and cost-effective term solutions. IRENA actively supports energy planners through its global LTES network. Governments share their experience, exchange best practices, and explore the most pressing future trends together with global experts. Government institutions and supporting technical agencies can become members of the LTES network. Join us. Contact LTES at irena.org for more information.